Okay, welcome back. So, this Henry Vaughan guy, interesting. you know, Silex Scintillans Part 2 came out 5 years after Part 1, and what they did is they took what was the leftovers from Part 1 and jammed them together with Part 2. Some critics, and I am not one of them, but I see they have a point, they think that Part 1 is a more cohesive set of poems, and I don't think so, but I also, but also some of them think that some of the stronger poems by Vaughan, some of his better poems, are in Part 2, which I do think that's true. And I think something happened. I think between the first two books, I think he must have been reading a lot of Jakob Burma, because his mysticism, if we want to call it that, takes on a different tone. It's a little bit more idiosyncratic, idiosyncratic as it was, and it becomes more Marian, which is kind of a shock. Now, and this is how he starts the collection after his introduction, his introductory poem, when he dedicates the book to my most merciful, my most loving and dearly beloved Redeemer, the ever blessed, the only holy and just one, Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, and the Sacred Virgin Mary. He throws the Sacred Virgin Mary in there, which that is very atypical for Anglican poetry of this time. We saw Herbert had some anxieties about it. He would certainly write a poem about Mary, but he wouldn't dedicate it to her. Now, why does he do this? Don't know why. My suspicion is that he was so fed up with the Puritans at this point, especially with their accusations of how Catholic or how papistical those of his camp were, that he's like, okay, you think we're Catholic? I'm going to show you Catholic. I'm going to mention the Virgin Mary. So take that. And he would have taken up some of this. I would call it sociological insight from Burma, who was also a Protestant, but Burma, his ideas were concerning Sophia were pretty radical for the time. Still pretty radical. He's still considered a heretic. Me too. So that's how Vaughan starts. Now, it also reminds me of another poet of this time, who was also an Anglican priest who was kicked out of his parish by the Puritans, and this is Robert Herrick, who was not really a metaphysical poet, but man, is he one of my favorite poets because I can identify with him, because he doesn't want to sweat the small stuff about religion, and he celebrates everything. With Herrick, he's I guess we can call him a Protestant, but he's mostly Catholic. His parishioners say the Rosary still. He's also very appreciative of pagan, and I mean Roman pagan religion. So he's got poems to the Lares, and then he's also celebrates English folk religion, which Wicca to you and me. So he celebrates that folk religion stuff that most the Puritans wanted to abolish it. Maypoles. Oh my goodness, it's satanic. But Herrick was all about all those things, and he was a big tent religious person, but he lived at the same time, and I think in his collection Hesperides, I think he too includes a lot of Marian poems in there and references to the Rosary to tell the Puritans, screw you. I think that's what he's doing. He's subversive, and that's what I love about him. But let's talk about Henry Vaughan. Let's go back to Henry and his poem Ascension Hymn. Now, I like this poem quite a bit. I puzzled over it because I didn't understand it for the longest time I was reading it. Even though it's 7 stanzas long, they're short stanzas. But I noticed that dust and clay, man's ancient wear, here must you stay, but I elsewhere. Soul sojourn here, but may not rest. Who will ascend must be undressed. Now, who's the I here? Who is the speaker? Dust and clay, man, Jensen, ancient where? Here you must stay, but I elsewhere. Well, it's got to be Jesus that's speaking, right? And yet, some that know to die before death come walk to the sky, even in this life. But all such can leave behind them the old man. If a star should leave the sphere, he must first mar her flaming wear, and after fall, for in her dress of glory she cannot transgress. Man of old within the line of Eden could like the sun shine all naked, innocent and bright, and intimate with heaven as light. But since he that brightness soiled, his garments be all dark and spoiled, and here are left as nothing worth, till the refiner's fire breaks forth. Then comes he, whose mighty light made his clothes be like heaven, all bright. The fuller whose pure blood did flow to make stained man more white than snow. He alone, and none else can bring bone to bone, rebuild man, and by his all-subduing might make clay ascend more quick than light. Dust and clay. So it starts with dust and clay and ends with clay ascending more quick than light. So here's again, like we talked in the emblem, right, with the Virgin Sophia at the top, the flint at the bottom, right? And there's no Virgin Sophia without matter present, and there's no flint without spirit present. Now, I think there's an illustration of this poem. It's not really illustrating this poem, but I think there's an illustration that helps explicate this poem, and this is actually from Robert Flood. I'll explain it and then I'll show it to you. So in Flood's illustration, he has what's called the double pyramid, even though they're not multidimensional. And it's got a triangle that has its base in heaven, you can say, and its apex at the earth. And there's another triangle which has its base at the earth and intersects the other triangle as it goes toward heaven where its apex is. So it's the same illustration. And you'll notice in Flood's illustration in the middle is the sun. So the sun is the thing that holds it in balance, and it's also a cipher for Christ because he is human and divine, right? So you have, he's human and divine in perfect balance, right? So they think that, and there's much more to it than that, but I'll just let you look at the illustration and we'll come back in a second. So I think what happens in Ascension Hymn is these two. It's an illustration of these two pyramids because it's hard to distinguish between the human speaker and the Christ speaking, and they kind of cross each other as the poem goes through. Right. So it's kind of stunning in a way. Now the next poem, very next poem in the collection. They are all gone into the world of light. Now notice there's this poem and there's quite a number of others which have at the beginning this little diacritical mark, this pilcrow it's called, or paragraph mark. Now each one of those in this collection is really a poem about someone or someones that Vaughan knew who had died. So he's really aware of those who have passed on. And this is, I think, his fine. I mean, they're all pretty good, but this is his finest of the Pilcrow poems, or my favorite anyway. They are all gone into the world of light, and I alone sit lingering here. Their very memory is fair and bright, and my sad thoughts doth clear. It glows and glitters in my cloudy breast like stars upon some gloomy grove, or those faint beams in which this hill is dressed after the sun's remove. Anyway, I won't read the whole thing, it's kind of long. They are all gone into the world of light. And here again, there's this image of light. All right, and it's not the light of the sun and the moon. It's the light of the first day. And I think, I mean, this is something even scientists nowadays could think about more. What is this light? What is this light? Is it still there? In my own philosophical this is Sophia. This is what the wisdom of God is that light. And a little later, line 25, he says, "And yet as angels in some brighter dreams call to the soul when man doth sleep, so some strange thoughts transcend our wonted themes, and into glory peep." That's it, right? That's what we do. Some strange thoughts. There's strange thoughts. I just had a strange thought about where that light is, but it's not a strange thought. If a star were confined into a tomb, her captive flames must needs burn there. But when the hand that locked her up gives room, she'll shine through all the sphere. And this shining. It comes again and again, right? And the next line is, "O Father of eternal life, and all created glories under thee, resume thy spirit with this world of thrall into true liberty. Either disperse these mists which blot and fill my perspective, still as they passed, or else remove me hence into that hill where I shall need no glass." That's how it ends. Pretty, and that's what I I guess in a lot of ways, Vaughan is one of the metaphysical poets. I mean, I identify in certain ways with all of them, but with him, I'm a farmer. I'm really invested in sociology and nature, so he's kind of when I finally started to understand Vaughan and his brother Thomas, I said, "Oh, that's what I am. That's how I think." Now I have a name for it. It's Rosicrucian mysticism, but still, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a traditionalist, going back to the 16th century, and which is what they're doing here. And another poem I want to look at, to digress and stop talking about myself, is Cock Crowing, which is another one of my favorites. I mean, I could say that in every page. And Cock Crowing, I think he draws a lot on Jakob Burma. And it's more of the stuff with the shining and the spark or the seed. Father of lights, which is from 1 James 17 or James 1:17. What sunny seed, what glance of day hast thou confined into this bird? To all the breed this busy ray thou hast assigned. Their magnetism works all night in dreams of paradise and light. Right? Why does the cock crow? Well, he sees the sun, right? Or he announces the sun. And what is the sun? The sun is light, right? It's the source of light. So and that's what he said. What sunny seed, what glance of day hast thou confined into this bird? That the rooster he's got is a resonance, right? A sympathetic vibration. This is the doctrine of signatures. Remember I talked about in the last lecture we talked about how in homeopathy and Paracelsus, the doctrine of signatures, hepatica or liverwort is shaped like a liver, kind of, so it must help the liver. Or bloodwort, it must be good for the blood, right? This kind of stuff, and that's what Vaughan's doing here with the rooster and the sun, doctrine of signatures. Their eyes watch for the morning hue, their little grain expelling night, so shines and sings as if it knew the path into the house of light. It seems their candle, however done, was tinned and lightened at the sun. It's just goofy with hermeticism. Another thing, there's an in joke in here, I think, when he says, "So shines and sings as if it knew the path unto the house of light." Well, one of his brother Thomas's books is Aula Lucis, or the House of Light, I think he's riffing on his brother right here. And I won't get into it. If you want to read about it, I write about it a lot in that chapter on the Rosicrucian mysticism of these guys. There's a lot of this go back and forth between the twin brothers, dropping hints to each other, and they were apparently they were identical twins. So I wonder, sometimes with twins, I mentioned before that one will be an extrovert, the other be introvert, and also sometimes with twins, one's right-handed and one's left-handed. Yeah, I know this from being a school teacher and teaching twins many times. It was an interesting observation, but I wonder how it was with these guys in real life. But they were identical. So, but they're definitely dropping stuff on each other in these poems and in their book, in Thomas's books. And it's also interesting that both of them only wrote from 1650 to 1655. Henry had one other book, and later he came out with a collection of stuff in honor of his brother, because Thomas died at the age of 43, I think it was, 43, 44, in an accident involving alchemy, where he got mercury lodged into his nose and died of poisoning. What a way to go, huh? But it's fun to, it was a lot of fun doing that research for that project, to see where they were dropping these hints on each other. It took a lot of work, but it was kind of fun. But anyway, he goes on in the third stanza. If such a tincture, such a touch, so firm a longing can empower, shall thine own image think it much to watch for thy appearing hour? Tincture, right? What is a tincture? This is from the language of Burma, and this is one of the hints where I think he had been reading Burma, because Burma was translated into English, and starting in 1648, and these poems are written in the 1650s, so that puts it right in the ballpark, right? And in Burma is the kind of stuff these guys would just gobble up. So he's reading Burma and this idea of the tincture. Now the tincture, what is the tincture? Well, for Burma, it's the thing that you dye something. So it's like a dye, right? So you dye wool. You have a tincture for the wool. It's tincted. Well, you don't really change the substance of the wool. You don't change the wool, but the wool is changed. Right? The same thing with the tincture in medicinal use. You don't change the substance. You changed its condition. And you can't take it out once it's in. I mean, people say, you could bleach it, but I don't think they knew about bleach in those days. I guess they could bleach it in the sun. But it's part of it then. It goes right in like a tattoo. It's like a tattoo. If Burma knew about tattoos, maybe he would have used tattoo instead of tincture as a metaphor. But nevertheless, such a fun poem, fun guy. Now let's look at another one, The Knot. And this is an extraordinarily sophiological poem, and it's a Marian poem as well, which might get you put on a list with the Puritans. And he says, bright Queen of Heaven, God's virgin spouse, the glad world's blessed maid, whose beauty tied life to thy house and brought us saving aid. Thou art the true love's knot. By thee God has made our ally. In man's inferior essence he with his did dignify. For coalescent by that band we are his body grown, nourished with favors from his hand, whom for our head we own. In such a knot what arm dares lose, what life, what death can sever, which us and him and us, united keeps forever. Now, I love this poem for a lot of different reasons. Especially, notice there's a reciprocity, right? It's a kind of an Athanasius. God became man so that man might become like God. It's a totally hermetic idea, as above, so below. But he's using the Virgin Mary as the knot, and that he would have gotten from Burma as in Sophiology, right? Because that's the miracle of Sophia. She makes God apparent to us. That's why Mary for Burma is the incarnation of Sophia. Because as in Proverbs 9, that through Sophia, through wisdom, God creates all things. Right? And so God's wisdom is in all things, and we see, as we saw through all these poems, that when Vaughan writes of nature, it's something shining through. Well, it's God shining through, and Sophia is like almost like the catalyst that allows that to happen. Similar here with the Virgin Mary as the knot, in her role in the incarnation, which is Sophiology writ large. So it's an interesting poem, and it's idiosyncratic for an English Protestant to write that as well. And I think last but not least, let's look at the night. And here he's Berman's all over this one as well. It says John 2:3. It's supposed to be John 3:2. Oops, printer. Through that pure, this is like when Nicodemus came, right? Through that pure virgin shrine, that sacred veil drawn o'er thy glorious noon, that men might look and live as glowworms shine and face the moon. Wise Nicodemus saw such light as made him know his God by night. Right? And here he's interpreting the visit of Nicodemus to the Master in the same terms of light and darkness, of the silex, the spark in the flint. Most blessed believer he, who in that land of darkness and blind eyes thy long expected healing wings could see, when thou didst rise. And what can never more be done, did at midnight speak with the sun. Again, polarities, right? At midnight, where's the sun? It's a belief. And so it's underneath the earth. But he's also speaking with the Son, S-O-N, of God. Oh, who will tell me where he found thee at that dead and silent hour? What hallowed solitary ground did bear so rare a flower, within whose sacred leaves did lie the fullness of the deity? No mercy seat of gold, no dead and dusty cherub, nor carved stone, but his own living works did my Lord hold and lodge alone. And here, another key Vaughanian thing, where trees and herbs did watch and peep, and wonder while the Jews did sleep. Where trees and herbs did watch and peep and wonder. All things testify to the glory of God in the poetry of Henry Vaughan. And he continues, dear night, this world's defeat, the stop to busy fools, cares check and curb, the day of spirits, my soul's calm retreat, which none disturb, Christ's progress in his prayer time, the hours to which high heaven doth chime. And I'm going to skip to the end. But it's so rich the way he develops this, and it's contemplative. You can see, and it's very foreign from when we started this course. Remember talking about the Ignatian spiritual tradition. There's nothing Ignatian in here. This is Hermetic, Hermetic or Rosicrucian. But then he gets to the end, and I think this last stanza is probably one of the finest stanzas in all of his poetry. There is in God, some say, a deep but dazzling darkness. As men here say it is late and dusky because they see not clear. Oh, for that night, where I and him might live invisible and dim. There is in God, some say, a deep but dazzling darkness. Deep but dazzling darkness. That's you could meditate on on those two lines for a long time. There is in God, some say, a deep but dazzling darkness. And the alliteration is just deep but dazzling darkness. Just delicious. Delicious. So, yeah, so anyway. So that's probably enough for Dear Henry Vaughan. Should we look at the envoy? And even in the envoy, I mean, I don't want to repeat too much because we kind of get the point by now. As he starts in the envoy, the last poem in the whole collection. Oh, the new world, the new world's new quickening sun, ever the same and never done. The seers of whose sacred light shall all be dressed in shining white, made conformable to his immortal shape, who wrought their bliss. Arise, arise. Right? Now let's think. The first poem in part 1 is regeneration. And here on the envoy is an image of regeneration. So it's really, it's a handbook of regeneration in a way, a poetic imaginative regeneration. And that was what Paracelsus, that's what the Rosicrucians were interested in, regeneration of, the Rosicrucian documents that came out in the 17th century. Not, when I say Rosicrucian, I don't want you to think I mean those kind of quasi-Masonic orders who have rituals and stuff. The Rosicrucians of the 17th century didn't have any rituals. No one's ever shown that they did. What they did have was a philosophy, and their philosophy was that there needs to be a regeneration of culture, a regeneration of medicine, of education, of religion, and that and that science, or knowledge, we could call it education or knowledge, should be regenerated, but not the way it became regenerated. It became regenerated, or wasn't regenerated. It became materialistic, and that's antithetical to the Rosicrucian idea. And so, if you look through history since the time of the Vaughans, in medicine or in the sciences, very little has been. It would be interesting, what would have happened with science had this kind of science, the kind that Henry Vaughan or Robert Flood they were pursuing. What if that had been followed up instead of the materialistic science that arose from Baconian empiricism and the Cartesian dualism, right? What would happen if we had a different kind of science? There are glimpses of it through history. I think the rise of homeopathy, which I think was in the 19th century, that's one example. And that was definitely an older tradition, just kind of modified. And also Rudolf Steiner, when he started anthroposophical medicine in the early part of the 20th century, that's kind of an echo of that. And there are other echoes of it out there. But I just wonder if culture at large had followed that lead. Where would we be now? If we had a medicine, if we had a science that was mindful of the realm of the spirit, and imagine investing all the research power and mind power into that instead of a materialistic, ultimately corporatized structure of medicine. What a different world we would be in. But anyway, I digress, but we're at the end. And so thank you for spending time with me, and thank Henry Vaughan, because he's here, for spending time with us. And next time we'll come back and we'll talk about another beautiful poet, Thomas Traherne, How Like a Child Can